For 6 years, Kingston Hale had lived the kind of life magazines loved to write about. At 38, he was one of Atlanta's most admired Black American CEOs, the brilliant force behind Hale Dynamics, a fast-growing logistics and infrastructure company that had expanded from the South into Europe and the Middle East. His face appeared in business journals, his speeches trended online, and his return to the United States after years abroad was treated like the homecoming of a legend. To the public, Kingston was polished, disciplined, and untouchable. A self-made millionaire with effortless charm and iron control. But beneath the success was a man carrying something unfinished. Europe had given him expansion, influence, and wealth beyond anything he imagined growing up. It had not given him peace. Somewhere between high-rise boardrooms in London, investor dinners in Paris, and factory visits in Berlin, there had always been a quiet ache inside him. It came in unexpected moments. In hotel rooms too expensive to feel warm, in long flights where sleep would not come, in memories of a woman he had never fully allowed himself to forget. Her name was Naomi Reed. Years ago, before his international transfer, Naomi had worked in the Hale family mansion as a maid. She was young, beautiful in a quiet, effortless way, and carried herself with a softness that never felt weak. While others in the household moved around Kingston with calculation, Naomi moved with sincerity. She did not flatter him because he was rich. She did not perform around him because of his last name. Around her, he could breathe. Their relationship had started in secret. A glance in the hallway became a conversation. Conversations became late-night moments on the service balcony behind the estate kitchen. Those moments turned into something deeper, something reckless, tender, and real. Naomi had made him feel seen in a life where everyone else seemed to see only the heir, the executive, the asset. For a while, she became the only person who knew the unguarded version of him. Then opportunity called him overseas. The expansion of Hale Dynamics into Europe was the kind of move that could define a career. It was supposed to be temporary at first, 2 years, maybe 3. Kingston had promised Naomi they would talk, plan, and figure out how to handle their relationship properly before he left. But the last weeks before departure had turned chaotic. His mother, Clarissa Hale, inserted herself into every detail of his life, as she often did. Meetings multiplied. Travel schedules changed. Security tightened. Communication became strangely difficult. And then Naomi disappeared. Her number stopped working. The staff said she had resigned suddenly. No forwarding address. No explanation. Kingston had searched for answers at first, but each lead vanished. His mother dismissed Naomi as a passing distraction and insisted the girl had likely moved on. In time, under pressure and distance and pride, the silence hardened into something he hated to name: abandonment. Still, he never truly forgot her. Now, after 6 years abroad, Kingston was back in Atlanta for good. The city had changed, new towers, sharper skylines, different traffic patterns. But the old power still sat where it always had. He moved through it like a man returning to territory he owned, but no longer trusted. The morning after a welcome reception thrown in his honor, Kingston did something no one expected. He dismissed his driver halfway through the day and told security to keep their distance. He wanted air. He wanted to walk. Not through the elite neighborhoods where his name opened gates, but through the older side of the city, where life had grit and history and truth. He wore a dark cashmere coat over a simple black sweater, designer watch tucked beneath the sleeve, his face half hidden behind sunglasses. Even dressed down, he carried wealth in the way he moved, clean, controlled, impossible to miss. He walked past a corner store, a row of weathered duplexes, a church with peeling paint, and a small open lot where children kicked a dented ball through the dust. That was when he saw them. 2 little boys. They could not have been older than 5. They were identical, same deep brown skin, same lean frame, same alert eyes, same strong mouth. One wore a faded denim jacket too big for his shoulders. The other had on a red hoodie with worn elbows. They were laughing as they walked side by side, each carrying a small paper bag of groceries between them like it was a serious mission. Kingston slowed. Something inside him clenched so hard it almost hurt. The resemblance was not vague. It was not the kind of thing a sentimental stranger imagined. It was precise, unsettling, undeniable. Their eyes looked like his. The set of their jaws looked like his. Even the way one of them tilted his head while listening to the other felt eerily familiar, like watching a memory of his own childhood come to life in duplicate. He stopped on the sidewalk and stared. The boys noticed him almost at the same time. Their laughter faded. They looked up at him with a wary intelligence children from hard places learn too early. For a brief second, all three of them stood still in the thin afternoon light, the city noise blurring around them. Then one boy tugged the other's arm. "Come on," he whispered. They quickened their pace. A cold wave moved through Kingston's chest. He told himself it was impossible. Coincidence. Projection. Jet lag. Memory playing tricks on a man who had returned carrying old ghosts. But his feet moved before logic could stop them. He followed. Not close enough to frighten them, but not far enough to lose them either. The boys crossed a narrow road, past a boarded-up laundromat, turned through a lane lined with overgrown weeds, and headed toward the edge of an older residential stretch where the houses looked forgotten by time. Kingston kept his distance, his heartbeat growing louder with every step. The road narrowed into cracked gravel. Trees leaned in from both sides. Then he saw it. A small old cottage, weathered and tired, with faded paint, sagging steps, and a rusted mailbox hanging crooked at the entrance. The twins pushed open the gate and hurried toward the porch. The front door opened before they even reached it. A woman stepped out. She was slim, wearing a simple knit sweater and jeans, her hair tied back hastily, as if she had been in the middle of chores. The moment she bent down to take the grocery bag from one child, Kingston stopped breathing. Naomi. Time did not soften the shock. It sharpened it. She looked older, of course. More fragile around the eyes, more careful in the way she held herself. Life had clearly not been gentle with her. But it was Naomi, his Naomi, the woman he had searched for, grieved, resented, and remembered across 6 long years. As if sensing something, she looked up. Their eyes met. The grocery bag slipped from her hand, oranges spilling across the porch. Her face drained of color. The twins turned in confusion, following her gaze. And suddenly Kingston understood why they had watched him so cautiously. Why they looked like him. Why his chest had tightened the moment he saw them. Naomi straightened too fast, panic flooding her expression. Instinctively, she pulled the boys behind her, as if her body alone could shield them from what had already happened. It was too late. Kingston took one slow step forward, all the air gone from his lungs, his voice breaking under the weight of recognition and dread. Naomi. Her lips trembled. He looked at the boys again, then back at her. Questions crashed through him too fast to name. Who are they? He asked, though somewhere deep down he already knew. Tears filled her eyes instantly. One of the boys peeked around her side. The other gripped the hem of her sweater. Kingston's sunglasses slipped from his hand to the dirt. Naomi, he said again, more urgently this time, his voice raw. Tell me what this is. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The tears fell first. And in that broken silence, with 2 small boys hiding behind the woman he had once loved, Kingston Hale realized his life had not come back to greet him gently. It had come back with 2 little faces that looked exactly like his own. For a few long seconds, nobody moved. The wind shifted through the dry grass around the cottage. One orange rolled off the porch step and settled near Kingston's shoe. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The ordinary sounds of the neighborhood continued as if the world had not just split open. Naomi looked like she might collapse. The twins pressed closer to her legs, one on each side, their eyes darting between her face and Kingston's. They were too young to understand everything, but not too young to feel fear. They knew their mother was frightened. That was enough. Kingston climbed the small wooden steps slowly, careful not to make any sudden move that might send the boys into tears. His own body felt strange to him, heavy and numb at once. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to see Naomi's trembling lips, the tear tracks on her cheeks. the exhaustion that had settled into her skin. "Talk to me," he said quietly. She shook her head once, not in refusal, but in disbelief, like she still could not accept that he was standing there. "I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought I would never see you again." Kingston stared at her as pain and confusion twisted together inside him. "You disappeared." That landed like a blow. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, and fresh tears spilled down her face. "No," she whispered. "I didn't disappear. I was made to." He looked at the twins again. They were listening now, watchful and silent. He lowered his voice further. "Are they mine?" Naomi's shoulders shook. Then she nodded. The world seemed to tilt. Kingston turned away for half a second, dragging a hand over his mouth. Every suspicion, every impossible thought he had tried to fight on the walk over, was suddenly real. 2 boys. His sons. His sons had been alive for years while he traveled the world believing Naomi had chosen silence over him. When he looked back, his eyes were wet. "How?" he asked, though he meant much more than biology. How did this happen? How did she carry this alone? How had he not known? Naomi glanced down at the boys and gently guided them inside. "Go wash your hands," she told them, her voice shaking but soft. "And stay in the kitchen for me, okay?" "Mom," one of them asked. "It's okay," she lied. The boys obeyed, but not without lingering glances toward Kingston. When the door shut behind them, Naomi leaned one hand against the porch post as if she needed support. "They found out after you left," she said. "Who?" Her eyes met his, and even before she said it, he knew. "Your mother." Kingston went still. Naomi drew in a shaky breath. "I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after you traveled. I tried to reach you. I tried everything I could. Your old number, your office, messages through staff I thought I could trust. But somehow, every road led back to her." A pulse started hammering in Kingston's temple. "She came to see me herself," Naomi continued. "Not at the mansion. At my apartment. She had a driver and one of the family attorneys with her. She already knew. I don't know how, but she knew everything." Kingston's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Naomi looked past him, as though the memory itself was standing in the yard. "She told me I was an embarrassment. She said I had trapped you. She said if I truly cared about you, I would stay away and never burden you with a scandal that could damage your future overseas. Naomi." She threatened me. Naomi's voice rose suddenly, years of terror breaking through. "She threatened my life before the babies were even born." Kingston froze. "She said the Hale name protected its own. She said if I went public, nobody would believe me. She said if I contacted you again, she could make me disappear so completely no one would ask questions." Naomi's face twisted with remembered fear. "And when I still didn't back down, she got colder. She said if I didn't cooperate, accidents happened every day, to women alone, to unborn babies, to children." Kingston felt sick. Naomi's tears kept falling, but now her voice had hardened with buried pain. "You don't understand what kind of power she came with. She made it clear she was watching me. My landlord suddenly wanted me out. My phone was disconnected. A clinic I had gone to somehow lost my records. A woman from social services appeared asking invasive questions that made no sense. It was like she wanted me to know she could reach into any part of my life." Kingston stepped back as if struck. For years, he had believed his mother controlling, elitist, manipulative. But this was cruelty on a level that made his skin crawl. "I would have come back," he said hoarsely. Naomi gave him a broken look. "I know that now. But back then, I was scared, pregnant, alone, and being told every day that if I made one wrong move, my children would pay for it." The front window curtain shifted slightly. One of the boys was peeking out. Kingston swallowed hard and lowered his voice again. "What are their names?" Naomi looked toward the window, and despite everything, tenderness softened her face. "Micah and Milo." He repeated the names under his breath like something sacred. "Micah. Milo. They're 5, she said. They'll be 6 in 2 months." Kingston's eyes shut. 5 years old. First words. First steps. Fevers. Birthdays. Scraped knees. Nightmares. Laughter. All of it gone to him. Not because he abandoned them, but because he had been cut out deliberately, surgically, by the person who had raised him. When they were born, Naomi continued softly, I wanted to tell you again. I wrote letters. I still have them. But every time I gathered courage, something happened. Someone watching the cottage. Strange calls with no one speaking. Once, the twins were barely a year old, and I found my front door unlocked after I knew I'd secured it. Nothing was taken. It was just a message. Kingston looked at the worn structure around them, the peeling porch rail, the patched window screen, the old flower pot with dry soil. It was obvious now that Naomi had not been hiding because she wanted to. She had been surviving. All this time, he murmured, you've been here. Not always here. We moved more than once. Cheap places. Quiet places. Places where people mind their business. Her mouth trembled again. I worked wherever I could. Cleaning jobs. Laundry. Kitchen work. Sometimes from home. I kept us going. Barely. Kingston looked at the cottage door. Inside that house were two sons who had carried his face through years of struggle while he signed contracts in cities across the ocean. He began to cry openly then, unable to stop it. Naomi stared at him, stunned, not because he was crying, but because she had likely spent years imagining this moment in 1,000 different ways, and perhaps none of them included his grief. I thought you forgot me, she whispered. He shook his head immediately. Never. She covered her mouth. I looked for you, he said. I swear to you, Naomi, I looked. I was angry, yes. Hurt. But I looked. And every trail ended in nothing. That was her. He knew. Deep down, with terrible clarity, he knew. A silence settled between them. Not empty, but overwhelmed. Then the door creaked open, and the twins stepped back onto the porch. They had clearly ignored her instruction to stay inside. Micah, the braver one, studied Kingston with solemn eyes. Mom, why you crying? Naomi dropped to her knees and gathered both boys close. Her voice fractured. Because something big just happened. Milo looked at Kingston again. Do we know him? Naomi couldn't answer. Kingston crouched slowly so he was lower, gentler, less imposing. His throat tightened as he took in their faces up close. He had his father's hands, but these boys had his eyes. There was no denying it. His voice came out rough. My name is Kingston. Micah frowned thoughtfully. You look like us. That almost broke him. A wet laugh escaped Naomi through her tears. Kingston nodded, his own eyes burning. Yeah, he whispered. I think I do. The boys looked to their mother for explanation, but Naomi was still trying to steady herself. And in that fragile moment, on a crumbling porch in front of an old cottage that had held years of fear, Kingston understood that the truth had finally surfaced, but it had not arrived alone. It had brought grief. It had brought stolen time. And it had brought a debt that someone was going to pay. The first hour inside the cottage was one Kingston would remember for the rest of his life. Naomi invited him in reluctantly, not because she wanted him gone, but because shock had stripped everything down to instinct. She moved as though she still expected danger to enter behind him. Kingston noticed it immediately. The way she checked the window before pulling the curtain, the way she automatically kept herself between him and the twins until she reminded herself who he was. The cottage was clean, but worn by hardship. The furniture was mismatched. The sofa had been carefully covered with a throw blanket to hide age and stains. A small bookshelf in the corner held children's books, a Bible, and a few grocery receipts tucked between pages like bookmarks. The kitchen table was old but polished from repeated care. On the wall hung crayon drawings, spelling worksheets, and 2 framed school photos that made Kingston pause. Micah and Milo, one in a navy polo, the other in a green one, both trying very hard not to smile too much for the camera. His sons. A tight ache spread through his chest so intensely he had to look away. Naomi made tea because she did not know what else to do with her hands. The twins sat side by side at the table, whispering to each other while stealing glances at Kingston. He sat across from them, long legs awkward beneath a chair clearly not built for a man like him. For once in his life, his money was useless. It could not recover the years already gone. It could not make this moment simpler. "What grade are you in?" he asked gently. "Kindergarten," Micah answered first. Milo added, "But we know first grade work too." Kingston nodded, trying to smile through emotion. "That's impressive." Micah tilted his head. "Are you famous?" Naomi almost choked on the cup she had just lifted. Kingston actually laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him by the question. "Depends who you ask." "You look rich," Milo said matter-of-factly. Naomi covered her face. "Milo, what?" he asked innocently. Kingston's laughter came easier that time, though his eyes stayed wet. "You're not wrong." The twins relaxed a little after that. Children had a remarkable way of cutting through tension with honesty, and slowly the room softened. Kingston learned that Micah loved drawing trucks and bridges. Milo was the more talkative one and loved asking questions about everything. They both liked pancakes, hated naps, argued over crayons, and slept in the same room because Milo did not like thunderstorms unless Micah was nearby. Every detail felt like both a gift and a wound. Kingston listened hungrily, storing every small fact in the part of himself that had waited unknowingly for them. But beneath the tenderness was pain sharp enough to bleed through every smile. Each time the boys mentioned a memory, when Mommy was sick, that time the roof leaked, when the neighbor fixed the heater, Kingston felt the loss of his absence like a personal accusation. He should have been there. When Naomi rose to bring out a plate of sliced apples, Kingston followed her quietly into the kitchen. She did not look at him right away. "They're smart," she said softly. "They're incredible." At that, her face crumpled with exhausted pride. "I did the best I could." He was quick to answer. "I can see that." She looked at him then, searching for pity and not finding it. What she found instead was reverence, respect, grief. Kingston lowered his voice. "You kept them safe. For now." The words struck him hard. "For now," he repeated. Naomi set the plate down with hands that trembled slightly. "Your mother stopped contacting me directly after a while. I think she believed fear would do the rest. And mostly it did. But every now and then, something would happen that reminded me I wasn't invisible." She glanced toward the boys. "I never knew if the silence meant she forgot us, or if it meant she didn't need to remind me anymore." Kingston's face darkened. "That ends now." Naomi's expression flickered with something between hope and terror. "You don't know what she's like when she decides she has to win." He gave a bitter smile with no warmth in it. "I do. I just didn't know how far she'd go." Before Naomi could answer, Milo called from the table. "Mr. Kingston?" Kingston turned. "Did you have toys when you were little?" The question was so simple it almost shattered him again. He walked back into the room. "A few," he said. "Mostly cars. A basketball. A train set once." Milo considered that carefully. "Did your dad live with you?" Naomi's eyes widened. Kingston understood the question for what it was. Not curiosity alone, but a child's instinctive attempt to place a man inside the structure of family. He answered honestly. "Yes. When I was little, he did." Micah looked at him steadily. "Do you have kids?" There it was. The room went still. Naomi gripped the edge of the counter. Kingston looked at the boys, really looked at them, then answered with a truth that felt at once brand new and ancient. "Yes," he said, voice thick. "I do." Milo blinked. "Where?" Kingston swallowed. Naomi's eyes filled again. He leaned forward slightly, careful and gentle. I think they might be right here." The twins stared. Children do not always process life-changing truths the way adults expect. There was no dramatic outburst, no instant tears. Just confusion, curiosity, and the slow assembling of meaning. Micah looked at Naomi first. "Mom." She nodded, hand over her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. Milo frowned. "He's our dad." Naomi managed a shaky, "Yes." Silence. Then Milo said, "For real?" Naomi let out a broken laugh through tears. "For real." Micah studied Kingston with a seriousness so startling it felt older than his years. "Then why weren't you here?" Kingston could have hidden behind adult language. He could have blamed distance, confusion, timing. Instead, he chose the truth they deserved. "Because I didn't know," he said. "I should have known. I wish I had known. But I didn't. And I'm sorry." Micah held his gaze. It was perhaps the hardest look Kingston had ever received. Not from a board, not from a rival CEO, not from an investor, but from a small boy with his face, asking without words whether he could be trusted. Milo broke first. "So if you're our dad, can you come to my school when I have the thing with the songs?" Kingston laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes," he said immediately. "If you want me there, I'll be there. Can I ask you something else?" Micah said, "Anything. Are you staying?" That question went through him like a blade. Kingston glanced at Naomi. Her face was tearful, vulnerable, guarded. This was not just about two children. It was about a woman whose trust had been shattered by power and silence. A promise made too quickly could wound as much as it healed. So he answered with care. "I'm not leaving again," he said. "Not from you." Naomi lowered her head and cried silently. Later, as evening settled and the cottage dimmed under amber lamp light, Kingston sat on the living room floor while the twins showed him their books and drawings. He let them climb against him naturally, cautiously at first, and then with growing comfort. Milo leaned on his arm while pointing at a picture book. Micah sat closer than before, pretending it was accidental. Kingston memorized everything. The softness of their curls, the warmth of their little shoulders, the way they smelled like soap and outside air, the sound of their laughter, the reality of their weight against him. It all felt miraculous and unbearable. At one point, Naomi stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watching the three of them together. Her face changed then, not into ease, not yet, but into the shocked sorrow of a woman seeing a stolen possibility briefly restored in front of her. Kingston looked up at her. No words passed between them. None were needed, because in that quiet room, with two boys curling instinctively toward the father they had just met, one truth stood taller than all the grief. Whatever had been stolen could never be fully returned. But from this moment forward, none of them would be lost again. Kingston did not sleep that night. He left the cottage only because Naomi insisted the twins were overwhelmed enough for one day and needed routine. He promised he would return in the morning. Micah gave a careful nod at that. Milo asked if mourning meant really mourning or rich people mourning. Kingston had laughed despite himself and promised it meant breakfast time mourning. Now he sat alone in the back seat of his SUV, city lights streaking across the window as Atlanta passed by in blurred gold and shadow. He was headed to the Hale estate. Not the corporate penthouse he technically owned. Not one of his private properties. The estate. The house where he had been raised, where appearances were everything, where family legacy had always mattered more than family tenderness. He had avoided living there since early adulthood, but his mother still treated it like a throne room. And tonight he intended to drag truth into its center. Clarissa Hale was in the sitting room when he arrived. She was elegant as always, even at night. A black woman in her 60s with sharp beauty, immaculate posture, and the kind of polished restraint that made weaker people mistake her for grace. She wore a cream silk blouse, tailored slacks, and diamond studs that flashed when she turned her head. There was a glass of red wine in her hand and classical music playing low in the background. At first, she smiled. Then she saw his face. "Kingston," she said smoothly, setting down her glass. "You look terrible. Has something happened?" He stood in the doorway, coat still on, hands clenched at his sides. "Yes," he said. "Something happened 5 years ago. I just found out about it today." Her expression barely shifted, but he saw it, the almost invisible tightening near her eyes. A warning signal. Recognition. He stepped further into the room. Naomi Reed. Silence. His mother did not blink. "She has 2 sons," he said. "Twin boys. They are mine." The pause that followed was so still it felt theatrical. Then Clarissa exhaled lightly and sat back in her chair. "So," she said, "you found them." No denial. No shock. No confusion. Just calm. A fury Kingston had never known roared through him. You knew. His voice shook with restrained violence. You knew all this time. Clarissa crossed one leg over the other. Lower your voice. He laughed once, disbelieving. That's what you have to say. You are emotional. I have sons, he thundered, the words exploding through the room. I have sons who grew up without me because you decided you had the right to bury them. Clarissa's face hardened. I did what was necessary. Kingston stared at her. Necessary. The word was so monstrous in its composure that for a moment he truly saw his mother not as the woman who raised him, but as a stranger wearing her face. She was a maid, Clarissa said coldly, a domestic employee involved in an inappropriate relationship with the heir to the Hale name. You were on the verge of international expansion. Your image, your future, the company's stability. Everything was at stake. I corrected a problem before it became a scandal. Kingston moved so fast the side table nearly toppled when he struck it with his hand. They were not a problem, he shouted. They were my family. Family? Clarissa snapped back for the first time. Do not insult me with sentiment after all I built to secure your position. Do you know what people would have done with that story? Black tabloid media, investors, competitors, everyone would have fed on it. The rich executives sleeping with household staff. Secret pregnancy. Hidden children. It would have followed you into every room in Europe. Kingston's breathing turned ragged. And what? She continued. You would have thrown away everything for a woman with no standing, no influence, no understanding of the world you were entering? At that, he went still in a frightening way. Say that again, he said quietly. Clarissa narrowed her eyes. You heard me. Kingston took a step closer. No, he said, voice deadly calm. Say it again. Say one more disrespectful thing about the woman who raised my sons alone while you terrorized her. The room chilled. For the first time, Clarissa seemed to understand that something fundamental had broken. This was not one of their usual battles of strategy and dominance. This was a son seeing his mother clearly and recoiling. I never touched her, Clarissa said after a pause, as though that improved anything. I merely made the consequences clear. Kingston's face twisted in revulsion. You threatened an unborn child. I protected you. You protected your image. Clarissa stood then, proud and rigid. I protected the family. Kingston shook his head slowly. No, you protected your control. That hit. He saw it. Clarissa's entire life had been built on control. Of rooms, narratives, reputations, her husband before his death, and most of all her son. She had tolerated Kingston's success because she believed some part of it still belonged to her design. Naomi and the twins represented what she could not manage. Love formed outside her approval, legacy born from tenderness rather than strategy. You had no right, Kingston said. I had every right as your mother. You forfeited that right when you chose cruelty over truth. Clarissa's voice sharpened. Be careful. He almost smiled then, a cold, devastated expression. No, he said. You be careful. He pulled his phone from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. I recorded the last 4 minutes. For the first time all evening, real alarm crossed her face. Kingston's eyes did not leave hers. Your admission, your justification, your contempt. I wanted to hear you say it yourself. Clarissa stared at the phone. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Expose what you did. Hold you accountable? Protect my children from you. His voice rose again. You don't know me at all if you still think legacy matters more to me than my sons. She recovered quickly, but not fully. This will damage everyone. You should have thought about that before you threatened a pregnant woman. There it was again. Not denial, but calculation. Damage. Exposure. Consequence. Clarissa was still counting reputational cost while he was counting lost years. Kingston stepped back and straightened his coat. From this moment on, he said, you will have no contact with Naomi or the twins. None. If I hear that anyone connected to you goes near them, I will involve law enforcement, the board, and every legal channel available to me. I will strip this house, this family office, and every layer of protection you think you're standing on. Clarissa's composure cracked just enough for anger to show. You would destroy your own mother for a maid and 2 children no one even knew existed? Kingston looked at her with such disappointment it was harsher than rage. No, he said. I would protect my family from the woman who tried to erase them. Then he turned and walked out. Behind him, Clarissa called his name once, sharp, commanding, furious. But he did not stop. Outside, the cold night air hit his face like truth. For years, he had thought power meant strategy, expansion, control. Tonight, he understood something else. Power was finally refusing to bow to the evil you inherited. And for the first time in his life, Kingston Hale was ready to use every piece of his power not to preserve his mother's empire, but to break her hold on the people she had harmed. Kingston arrived at the cottage the next morning before 8, exactly as promised. He came without a convoy, without press, without the visible machinery of wealth that might make Naomi retreat. He brought breakfast from a local cafe, children's books he bought at sunrise from a nearby shop, and something far more important than either, the steady presence of a man who intended to stay. Milo opened the door before Naomi could stop him. You came really mourning, he announced, clearly impressed. Kingston smiled. I said I would. Micah appeared behind his brother, trying to look less excited than he was. Naomi stood a few feet back, wearing a plain gray cardigan over a white top, her hair loosely tied, her expression tired from what was clearly a sleepless night. He could not blame her. Too much had changed too quickly. Can I come in? He asked gently. She stepped aside. Breakfast was louder than the day before. The twins were less afraid now and full of questions. What kind of car did he drive? Did he know basketball players? Had he ever seen snow in real life? Could he make pancakes? Did rich people really eat tiny food on big plates like in fancy restaurants? Kingston answered all of it, amused and aching all at once. Naomi watched from the stove while pretending to tidy what did not need tidying. He could feel her uncertainty. Gratitude was there, but so was habit, the habit of carrying everything alone, of bracing for peace to disappear. Once the boys were distracted with coloring books, Kingston asked if he could speak to her outside. They stepped onto the porch. Morning light made the cottage look even more fragile. The wood needed repair. The roofline dipped on one side. A chill draft leaked through the old frame near the window. Kingston saw everything now with a father's eye, not a visitor's. The place was not unsafe in a dramatic sense, but it was inadequate. And the fact that Naomi had managed to make it feel warm for the twins anyway only deepened his respect for her. I want you and the boys out of here, he said. Naomi tensed immediately. Kingston, not because I'm ashamed of this place, he said quickly. Because you shouldn't have to live like this. Not after everything. Her face tightened. We've managed. I know. That's the problem. She looked away toward the yard. He softened his voice. I'm not trying to come in and erase your life, Naomi. I know I don't get to do that, but my sons deserve stability. So do you. The word landed strangely between them, deserve. As if she had not been allowed to think in those terms for years. I don't want charity, she said at last. Kingston nodded. And I'm not offering charity. Then what are you offering? He held her gaze. Responsibility. Partnership. Protection. Time. The truth. Whatever it takes. Her eyes filled. For a moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice stripped of pride, she asked the question that mattered most. What if she comes after us again? Kingston answered without hesitation. Then she deals with me. Naomi studied him carefully, perhaps measuring the difference between the man she had loved in secret and the man standing before her now. Older, sharper, heavier with power and pain. I confronted her last night, he said. Naomi's expression changed instantly. You did? Yes. Fear flashed across her face before relief could reach it. What happened? She admitted enough. His jaw tightened. And she knows I know. Naomi sat down slowly on the porch chair as if her legs had weakened. One hand covered her mouth. For years she had carried her truth in isolation, perhaps wondering whether speaking it aloud would ever change anything. Now the silence had broken at the source. She admitted it? Naomi whispered. Yes. Tears slipped from her eyes, but this time they were different. Not just grief. Release. Kingston crouched in front of her. I'm moving carefully. Lawyers, security, everything. But first, I need you safe. The word safe nearly undid her. After a long pause, Naomi asked, where would we go? Kingston had thought about that. Not to the estate, never there. Not anywhere directly tied to his mother's sphere of control. Instead, he told her about a private residence he owned on the north side of the city, modern but quiet, gated but not flashy, with enough space for the twins to have their own room, a yard, nearby schools, and staff chosen personally by him, not inherited from family infrastructure. Naomi listened silently. I'm not asking you to trust this instantly, he said. I know trust has to be rebuilt, but let me give you and the boys a real home while we figure out the rest. She lowered her eyes. A real home. He heard what she meant beneath it. Not luxury, but permission to stop surviving by the inch. The move happened 2 days later. Kingston handled it with precision. Security was discreet. Naomi was allowed to choose what came and what stayed. Nothing was rushed in a way that robbed her of agency. The twins were told they were moving to a bigger house because their dad wanted them closer and safer. Milo thought this was the best surprise in history. Micah was more cautious, but secretly thrilled at the idea of having his own desk. When they arrived, the boys stared at the house in awe. It was modern, elegant, full of clean lines and warm wood, with wide windows and a backyard large enough for running. Not extravagant in a cold way, just calm, bright, and carefully designed. A place that felt like the life Kingston wished they had always known. Inside, the twins' room had been prepared but not overdone. 2 beds, bookshelves, soft rugs, a shared wall painted with subtle City and Stars artwork, toy bins, child-sized robes in the bathroom. Small details everywhere, chosen not by a decorator alone, but by a father trying desperately to close distance with care. Milo launched himself onto one bed and shouted, "This mattress is rich." Even Naomi laughed at that. Micah ran a hand over the desk in the corner. "Is this ours?" Kingston nodded. "Everything in here is for you." The boy looked stunned. Naomi stood in the doorway, quiet and overwhelmed. Her bedroom down the hall was simple and beautiful. Soft neutral tones, fresh flowers, a reading chair by the window, drawers empty and ready for her things. She had spent years in spaces built around necessity. This room had been built around rest. Kingston did not crowd her reaction. He just said, "You can change anything you want." She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Why are you being so gentle with me?" The question caught him off guard. Because what answer could hold all of it? Because I loved you. Because I failed you without knowing it. Because every sign of hardship in your face makes me want to burn the world down. Because you raised my sons alone. Because I am terrified of causing more damage. In the end, he told her the truth in its simplest form. Because life hasn't been. Naomi looked away and cried softly. That evening, after the boys fell asleep in their new room, Milo sprawled sideways, Micah still clutching a toy truck Kingston had brought. Naomi and Kingston sat in the living room under low warm light. The silence between them was no longer empty. It held memory, regret, the outline of something unfinished. "You really looked for me?" she asked. "Yes. Why did you stop?" He took a breath. "Because every door closed. And because after a while, I started to think maybe you chose silence. It hurt too much to keep believing otherwise." Naomi nodded through tears. "I wrote to you so many times. Then we were both speaking into walls she built." They sat with that. Then Kingston said quietly, "I loved you." Naomi's breath caught. He did not soften it with the past tense, and they both knew it. She turned her face toward him slowly, all the years of pain and buried feeling flickering in her eyes. "I loved you too," she whispered. "I never stopped. I just learned how to survive without saying it." Kingston closed his eyes briefly. So much had been stolen. But in that house, with their sons asleep down the hall and truth finally allowed to breathe, the impossible began to shift. What had started as rescue was becoming something larger. Not just reunion, return. Clarissa Hale did not surrender quietly. Kingston had expected resistance, but what followed confirmed just how deeply rooted his mother's need for control truly was. Within days, pressure began appearing in polished forms. Legal inquiries disguised as concern, whispers through board members, subtle attempts to question Naomi's credibility, and private suggestions that Kingston was making emotional decisions that might destabilize leadership. He saw the strategy clearly. Clarissa would not attack like a villain in plain sight. She would do what powerful people did best: weaponize reputation, process, and polish language until the victim looked unstable and the aggressor looked prudent. But Kingston was no longer the son who mistook sophistication for innocence. He assembled a legal team independent of the family's longtime counsel. He hired investigators. He ordered a complete review of estate communications from the year he left for Europe. He pulled archived security logs, staff exit records, and financial traces connected to hush arrangements and relocation payments. Bit by bit, a picture emerged, enough to prove interference, intimidation, and deliberate concealment, even if every threat had not been put in writing. Naomi gave her statement privately. It was one of the hardest things she had ever done. She sat in a conference room wearing a navy dress Kingston's assistant had quietly arranged for her, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as attorneys asked careful questions. Her voice shook at first, then steadied, then deepened with a strength that had spent too many years crouched beneath fear. She told them everything: the visit from Clarissa, the threats, the sudden housing disruptions, the severed phone line, the men who lingered too often near her door. The message woven through all of it: stay hidden or lose everything. Kingston was not allowed in the room while she testified to preserve the integrity of the process, but he waited outside for every minute of it. When she came out, pale and exhausted, he stood immediately. "You did it," he said softly. Naomi looked at him with eyes full of old storms. "I was shaking the whole time. And you still did it. That mattered." Meanwhile, the twins were adjusting to their new life in ways both sweet and heartbreaking. They were thriving in the house, sleeping better, eating better, laughing more. But their questions had deepened. They wanted to know why their dad had not been there before. They wanted to know if Grandma Clarissa was nice. They wanted to know if they had cousins, if they could visit the office, if having a rich dad meant they had to stop liking cartoons with cheap animation. Kingston answered what he could honestly and shielded what he could not. He took them to the office one Saturday when the building was mostly empty. The boys ran around his corner office in tiny sneakers, pressing buttons they were not supposed to touch, and spinning in leather chairs that swallowed them whole. Employees who happened to see them did double takes so visible it almost would have been funny under different circumstances. For the first time, Kingston did not care about optics. He cared that Micah grinned when looking out over the skyline from the 42nd floor. He cared that Milo proudly told a receptionist, "Our dad owns part of this sky." At the board level, however, the stakes were serious. Clarissa had influence. She did not hold an operational role, but her legacy, shareholding ties, and social capital still mattered. A scandal involving hidden heirs, abuse of power, and intimidation could send tremors through both family and company networks. Some advised Kingston to resolve the matter quietly. Others hinted that public scandal could hurt the business more than private compensation would. Kingston rejected every effort to reduce Naomi and the twins to a settlement. He did not want secrecy repackaged as sophistication. He wanted accountability. The showdown came during a private family office meeting that Clarissa assumed she still controlled. Kingston entered with his legal counsel, a folder of evidence, and a resolve so cold it silenced the room before he spoke. Clarissa was there, poised as always. Two advisors sat near her, their discomfort obvious. She had expected negotiation. What arrived instead was finality. "You used family resources to isolate Naomi Reed," Kingston said. "You interfered with private communication, engaged in intimidation, and concealed my children from me for years." Clarissa folded her hands. Allegedly, Kingston slid documents across the table. Staff transfer records, disbursement trails, internal memos, testimony summaries. The audio transcript from the night she admitted to correcting a problem before it became a scandal. Her expression shifted for the first time into something close to real defeat. One advisor cleared his throat. The other refused to meet anyone's eyes. Kingston spoke with brutal precision. You will resign from every advisory function connected to the family office. You will have no involvement in any trust decisions affecting my children. You will not approach Naomi. You will not contact the twins. You will not send representatives, gifts, letters, or apologies crafted by lawyers. You are done. Clarissa's mouth tightened. You think you can exile me? I think you exiled yourself. And if I refuse? He held her gaze. Then I proceed publicly. The room went very still. Clarissa knew what that meant. Not just embarrassment. Exposure. Reputational collapse in circles where image was currency. Questions from the board. Press scrutiny. Social condemnation. A legacy recast not as discipline, but cruelty. She looked at her son for a long time and finally saw that this was not leverage. It was over. What did she do? Clarissa said quietly, bitterly. To make you choose her so completely. Kingston answered without hesitation. She loved me when she had no reason to gain from it. And she protected my sons when you tried to erase them. Clarissa looked away. That was the closest thing to victory Kingston needed. Not because he enjoyed breaking his mother, but because truth had finally been spoken aloud in a room that had spent decades decorating lies. When he returned home that evening, Naomi met him in the kitchen. She could read it in his face before he said a word. It's done, he told her. Her eyes widened. Done. She's out. Legally, socially, structurally. She has no reach near you now without consequences. Naomi sank into a chair, one hand over her chest, as if her body did not know how to process the sudden absence of fear. For so long, danger had been the background music of her life. Now silence felt unfamiliar. Kingston knelt beside her. You're safe, he said. She broke then, not into panic, but release. Years of tension spilled out in sobs that seemed pulled from somewhere deeper than memory. Kingston held her through it, one arm firm around her shoulders, his other hand steady at her back. He did not tell her to calm down. He did not rush her grief. He just stayed. Upstairs, the twins slept in peace, unaware that a war fought partly for them had finally turned. And downstairs, in the arms of the man she had once loved in secret, Naomi cried until fear loosened its grip enough for hope to enter. Healing did not arrive all at once. It came in layers. In breakfasts eaten together without tension tightening Naomi's face every time a car slowed outside. In school drop-offs where the twins proudly raced ahead while Kingston tried to learn the names of teachers and other parents. In quiet evenings where cartoons played in the background while laundry folded, dinner simmered, and no one had to be afraid of the next knock at the door. The house changed as they changed. It became less like a carefully prepared residence and more like a real home. Toys began appearing in the wrong rooms. Micah's drawings accumulated on the refrigerator. Milo hid cookies badly and denied it worse. Naomi's books appeared on the living room table. A framed photo from the twins' school event replaced a decorative object in the hallway because Kingston liked seeing them every time he passed. He had missed their beginnings, so he showed up ferociously for everything he could still reach. He attended parent meetings, soccer practice, school songs, pediatric appointments, and bedtime story negotiations. He learned which twin pretended to be brave when sick and which one asked big questions right before sleep. He learned how Micah went quiet when hurt, while Milo talked more when nervous. He learned that both boys liked falling asleep when Naomi sang softly from the doorway. One night, after the twins were asleep, Kingston asked if she would sing again. Naomi looked embarrassed. It's just something I've always done. It sounds like home, he said. Those words settled deep. Their own relationship rebuilt more slowly. Love had survived, but trust had scar tissue over it. Naomi was not a young woman slipping into secret affection anymore. She was a mother who had learned the cost of vulnerability. Kingston, for all his devotion, was a man reckoning with guilt, grief, and the ways power had once insulated him from truths happening too close to home. So they did not rush. They talked, really talked, about the past, about what they had been to each other then, about what had been stolen, about anger neither of them had fully admitted. Naomi confessed how she had hated him some nights. Not because he deserved it, but because missing him while carrying his children alone had been unbearable. Kingston admitted he had buried himself in work partly because failure in love had felt easier to outrun than confront. Piece by piece, honesty cleared what silence once poisoned. Then one evening in early autumn, everything shifted. The twins had spent the day in the backyard, chasing each other with foam airplanes until sunset wore them out. After bedtime, Kingston and Naomi sat outside under soft patio lights, the night air warm enough for comfort. She wore a cream lounge set, simple and beautiful. He was in a charcoal Henley and dark trousers, his usual executive sharpness softened by home. For a while they said nothing. Then Naomi asked, "Do you ever think about what life would have looked like if she hadn't done all this?" "All the time," he admitted. And he looked at her. "We probably would have made mistakes. We were young. I was leaving. Life would still have been hard in places. But I think," he paused, "I think we would have loved each other out loud." Naomi's eyes filled instantly. She laughed softly through the emotion. "Out loud?" "Yeah," he said. "No hiding. No back doors. No pretending you were less than what you meant to me." A tear slipped down her cheek. Kingston reached for her hand. This time she let him take it fully. "I can't give you back those years," he said. "I hate that with everything in me. But I can give you every year ahead of me honestly." Naomi looked at him for a long moment, reading his face the way she always had, as if searching for the place where truth lived. Then she whispered, "I still love you out loud." That was it. He moved closer, slowly enough for her to stop him if she wanted. She did not. When he kissed her, it was not like the hidden urgency of years ago. It was deeper, grieved, grateful. The kiss of two people who had lost too much to waste what remained. Months later, on the twins' 6th birthday, Kingston made a decision final in both heart and form. The celebration was held in the backyard under modern string lights and blue and gold decorations chosen by the boys themselves. Friends from school came. So did a few trusted people from Kingston's world, carefully selected, genuinely kind. There was laughter, music, oversized cupcakes, and the kind of joy that felt almost holy after years of deprivation. When the guests thinned out and sunset painted the sky amber, Kingston asked Naomi to walk with him to the far end of the garden. She looked puzzled but followed. The twins, suspiciously quiet for children their age, waited near the flower bed in matching navy outfits. Micah was trying not to smile. Milo was visibly failing. Kingston turned to Naomi and took both her hands. "I spent years building companies," he said, voice unsteady for the first time all day. "I thought that was what legacy meant. But legacy is not buildings or valuation or headlines. It's this. You. Our boys. The family I should have fought harder to protect, even when I didn't know I was losing it." Naomi's eyes widened. He took a breath and sank to one knee. She covered her mouth. "Naomi Reed," he said, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. "You were never beneath me. You were the best part of my life before I understood how to keep it. You are the mother of my sons, the woman I never stopped loving, and the home my heart kept searching for in every country I crossed." He opened a velvet box. "Marry me. Let me love you the way I should have from the beginning, openly, faithfully, and for the rest of my life." Naomi broke into tears immediately. The twins began bouncing in place. Milo stage whispered, "Say yes, Mom." Micah added, more seriously, "Please. It would make the story better." Naomi laughed so hard through her tears she nearly doubled over. Then she looked at Kingston, at the ring, at the boys, at the life standing in front of her like answered prayer after years of silence. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." The twins exploded in cheers. Kingston rose and slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands before pulling her into his arms. The boys crashed into them seconds later, creating a tangled, laughing, crying knot of four people who had every reason to be broken, and yet had somehow found their way back to one another. In the end, it was never just a story about a millionaire CEO returning home. It was about a man discovering that the greatest loss of his life had been hidden in plain sight. It was about a woman who survived fear long enough for truth to find her again. It was about two little boys with their father's face who led him, unknowingly, straight to the family he was always meant to fight for. And at last, after years of secrecy, pain, and stolen time, they no longer had to love in hiding. They had each other, fully, openly, at home. Finally, we have come to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, do well to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.